30 seconds, please.
His name is Josh. The contractor.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. When did Dave get?
About 2 months ago. He went the same time that Bancroft or Banfield for recreation went.
Okay, I didn't know.
Because he wanted to change the scope of the work a little bit, and they didn't have the qualifications he wanted. What?
Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, January 11th, 2022 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed Board of Managers meeting. Our first, would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the public comment period. We have nobody in the chamber this evening, so I'm going to pass that again. Anybody's welcome to come down, share their thoughts and feedback. What are we doing right? What could we be doing better? We'd love to hear from you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. So I'm going to confirm, are any changes to the agenda? Anybody, gents on the board? None. Joni, any changes? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second on the floor. All those say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 4-0. Thank you, everybody. So then we're on to our other old new business, our programs and projects update.
President Meiser, managers, Jeff Anderson here will be walking us through our programs and projects update, which is fairly brief today.
Okay, so we'll move to the first slide. It's that time of year again. Carp seining will be a primary focus. So as of today, carp are in a location in Upper Prior Lake near Nadio Marina that we find to be suitable almost for seining. We'll follow those pretty actively over the next week and hopefully prepare a seine of some sort next week. Spring Lake is still not in favorable conditions. Over the last month, we've been working on the closeout of the MPCA 319 and Bowser watershed-based feeding grants. The reporting is set to be completed by the 1st of February. This is a culmination of both of the grants are 3-year efforts to remove carp and complete objectives, including tracking, blocking, removing, and establishing a water quality response within Spring and Upper Prior Lakes. So I'll just dive into 3 slides detailing some of the objectives and results. These right here is Upper Prior Lake heat map of carp locations, primarily over the last 3 years, but we've included data from 2015 through 2018. And this shows really where we target carp. These locations are December through February. We've made maps for the other seasons of the year, and they do correspond to where carp spawn and where they hang out. But right here is where we find them in the winter.
I have a brief question.
Yep.
When you say they're not favorable to conditions, you mean the carp are not schooling in large enough schools to be worthwhile to do a seine? Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Hennis, that's correct. Not enough tags have been found.
Yeah, the 2 primary spots, one are by me, as you know, and the other one is by across the lake at Sailor's Greenhouse. So they're still scattered, right?
Exactly.
Now on the screen.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
So currently,
But this is for 6 years. I'm talking about now.
current conditions, we're finding 2 tags in that eastern basin and 1 tag in that northwestern basin. And the other 6 tags that we currently have active are spread apart and they weren't found.
So you have 8 working tags on Spring Lake. Working tags do you have on Upper Prairie?
I think 11.
11? All right, thank you.
You can
Yeah.
back check me another week on that. Okay, so here's Spring Lake. You can really see where Manager Hennis mentioned that the 2 optimal to remove carp are where these darker purple heat indications are present. This busy looking slide kind of shows a lot of information. On the left, it really shows that all these efforts that we work towards in our IPM plan are building upon each other. And what we've found is carp want to move, they want to migrate, they want to spawn. And our objectives were to find where they move using pit tags indicated in the red dots, install barriers indicated in the highlighted yellow and black, and really show where carp move. On the right, you can see the 3 barriers that were objectives within the grants, and those are on the top is the ferric chloride barrier, the middle one is the Northwood Pond barrier, and the lower one is the tadpole barrier. And ultimately, this was to create a water quality response that involved increasing native vegetation, lowering the water quality total phosphorus, and removing carp from the lake. We've done this through numerous methods, traps, seining attempts, gill netting, and we've really learned quite a bit in the last few years. Our measurable outcomes were removing biomass from the lake, which has resulted in Upper Lake over the last 3 years, over 900 pounds phosphorus per year. The installation of 3 permanent barriers, the establishment of native vegetation, and providing a social outcome through community events and educational content that shows the importance of how common carp degrade water quality and the importance of native aquatic plants. So that's high-level summary of our 2 grants and kind of what we've done over the last 3 years.
Jeff, did we consume all of the funds in that grant?
The 319 grant that will be fully complete, yes, we've consumed all those funds.
Okay.
The Bowser grant is technically still going. It's been extended. I haven't completed the Bowser funding analysis quite yet.
Okay, but that's why I wasn't sure when I saw the word it was closed. I didn't meant that the funding mechanism or if we'd consumed all the funds, so, okay.
Right, it's kind of a gray area because the grant's not extended, but I can't close it out in
The last
fund yet.
So you can still give them an invoice and close it out?
Yes.
Gotcha. That's all I needed to know. Thank you. Bruce, did you have something? Okay, thank you. I think we're on to Spring Lake West.
President Meiser, managers, we have just completed a study of the Spring Lake West subwatershed feasibility study, and Carl Almier with EOR was the lead author, or his firm oversaw that, and will be presenting the draft findings of that report.
Good evening, everyone. So I'll be real quick with this. I just have 5 slides that will speak to. The full report was in your packet. But as mentioned, we just recently completed this feasibility study. On the left on your screen orients you to where this 384-acre watershed is the upper watershed. It's the northern portion of the upper watershed west of Spring Lake. Also on the screen you can see loading from this watershed, and that might look different to you than what the loading is reported in the upper watershed blueprint. It's lower, and the reason it's lower is because right now, if I could move the cursor on this screen to the pond that's in the subwatershed, there is quite a bit of loading that is monitored in the channel downstream. But we also know that the SWCD got a grant to rectify the issues with that feedlot pond and reduce the loading from that. So we did want to reflect to the extent that we could some of those high spikes that were being monitored being alleviated by that project in and of itself. So whether it's that project or the projects that are identified in this feasibility, double counting on load reductions. So some of the load you saw, for those that you saw preliminarily saw a draft of this report, the loading is being reported as if that project is implemented. Other things to note about the watershed, it's predominantly in agricultural land use with the exception of the highway department and the portion of the commercial industrial park that drains to this watershed. Some of it actually drains west. Within this study area, we did identify essentially 3 potential practices: iron enhanced sand filters, restoration, and ponding just for flood reduction. What is really, I think, recommendations of the report, you'll see that the flood aspect of this subwater really didn't prove to be cost beneficial for pursuing. It's reported, it was looked at in the study, but I'm not going to go into any greater detail on that. So on your screen, you can see the 2 circles are the locations on 2 different landowners' properties of the various iterations of iron enhanced sand filters. I know one question is why 8? Originally, we were targeting the ones east side of Marshall Road, which are all have enough fall in the ditch that can gravity feed that system from the ditch, run it over the surface, and have an underdrain. That was the original target area. Some of the outreach has kind of stalled with that landowner, so we were directed to look stream to the west, and that came with another series of options. The options were presented primarily for discussion with landowners, but it also kind of helped prove out some of the cost-benefit ratios. Sometimes bigger is not always best, and so you'll see that as well. And then the circle was the identified location for either flood reduction through storage or wetland banking. The iron enhanced sand filters, the 8 of them, various locations. The 3rd option listed under the Highland property was the one that is the most cost beneficial in terms of dollars per pound removed. They all kind of range, you can see on the Highland property, from around $400 per pound removal over the lifespan of a potential location. The ones on the west side of Marshall Road on Kruger are not as favorable because you would have to use a pump to bring the water out of the ditch system up to the filter to allow it to gravity drain back to the ditch. So the west ones are less ideal, and you can see that reflected in the equivalent, which on that ranges from 700 to a little over 1,000. So not quite twice the cost for the dollars per pound removed over the lifespan, but you do incur annual pumping costs, electricity, telemetry, and having to deal with power and just increased annual maintenance associated with more complicated infrastructure. So of the 8 that we looked at, locations, option 3 would be the one that would be the most to move forward with. Although when you look at the total phosphorus removal, there's some other near, second front runners or, second tier projects. If for some reason land outreach didn't work out for option 3, there are other ones that are close to being as estimated construction cost for option 3 is $313,000. That includes roughly $25,000 for landowner compensation potentially for easements similar to what is done, say, for at Sutton Lake, looking at the land value and compensating on a basis.
Carl, at 25,000, that's for a perpetual easement.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. So far, all the district's easements, to my knowledge, are perpetual in nature. They're not a termed easement.
Bruce?
Carl, just all options on the Highland property, I assume number 1 is the largest or longest. Is that all on their Highland property? There's another property owner? Everything is on their property?
Correct. All options 1 through 4 are on a single landowner's property, Highland, and then the 5 through 8 are on a single landowner's property,
Okay.
Kruger.
So you didn't find anything worthwhile on the Henches Ames property? Is that what you're saying?
So the next slide addresses
Oh.
the Henches and Ames property. If we want to go one more slide forward. So, south of the county road and west of 13, this is roughly 280 acres that is south of that intersection. And in terms of, we wanted to target for water quality purposes as far downstream as possible. It's not to say you couldn't do a sand filter at this outlet as well. It's just not the focus there, and we were looking more for like flood reduction and holding water back, utilizing what's a ditched area and simple construction mechanisms at that culvert under the county trail east or 282. So that was the original target, and thinking what could possibly be done in this area. As I mentioned, the flood reduction didn't really prove itself out. Just really its proximity to Spring Lake is the issue. Flood storage is much better off being done further away from the lake. Delaying it a little bit here, close to another large water body, Spring Lake, has limited benefit on the lake. But for this, the wet banking option, which has always been kind of an issue for the district from a program regulatory perspective, where wetland is filled in the district, it almost is always, there's no banks within the district. It almost is always exported, mitigated somewhere outside the district. What we saw here is that you could generate nearly 30 acres of credit, 24 and some change of new wetland credit, the NWC, and then 5.7 acres of buffer. The estimated construction cost, well, first, the estimated value at going rates for wetland credits is $1.65 million for that amount of credits that could be generated. The construction cost listed at $1.05 million, that's predominantly a potential easement acquisition. The actual construction cost is a 20% of that value. So we're hedging, I guess, or being conservative here, that the district would have similar practices for compensation. And then the net, so how much value those credits versus the cost to build it and compensate landowner, there would still be a net value of $600,000 that is, I guess, generated after completion.
Great.
Carl, from going to SWCD meetings as a liaison, I've learned that they, of course, are doing wetland banking, but, and maybe you can answer this more than I can, but the impression that I got, it's been really slow selling credits. Have you heard anything along that line? I wish Jim Fitzsimmons was here. He'd have an instant answer on this, but what do you know? Which troubles me as far as us going forward with this. I mean, it's a nice idea, but if we can't get a return back reasonably quick.
I think that may have been the case for a number of years, just given the limited amount of development. But that's certainly back on the rise in terms of development. And there are a number of bank service areas that have no banks in them. So that doesn't quite jive with what I understand. I know Bowser, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, is actively looking and usually has an annual call, like, do you know of any large wetland banking opportunities for the roadway authority program that they administer? So road authority can just tap into wetland banking credits that are reserved for road projects, and they're actively looking for projects to take on. So this may, one of the recommendations is to further vet. We've already had discussions with Bowser informally about, is this a big enough size for Bowser to just champion and run with it and, leverage somebody else's dollars in engineering to pursue this activity, and there was interest. So that would be kind of a next step too, is to further flesh that out with Bowser. If the district wanted to just say, somebody else, great idea, somebody else do it for us, that's an opportunity as well.
Thank you.
Carl, I'll get you next, Bruce. Carl, I'm not as familiar with the wetland banking, so if the way I understand it, then we would pony up the costs to pursue that, and then we receive the benefits as we're getting the credits.
That is one pathway that the district could consider. They could do the project themselves, working with the landowner, and establish a bank, the owner of those banked credits that are on open market then for developers. Work through the wetland seedings to see if they can first get the banking option, but then it's kind of open market. A developer could purchase credits from the district as a bank owner to recoup the costs and at least at current values recoup and exceed and generate revenue out of the project.
How does the math, as you say, the net versus the construction cost compared to other projects around the state?
I don't think I have a good frame of reference for that. I would guess that it's a fairly favorable net given the simplicity of the project, given that it's a ditch area that you're basically just structure in. It's not, some wetland banking projects end up moving a lot more dirt and cost a lot more to build, and so the net would be less in terms of what could be recouped out of the credit value.
Okay, thanks. Bruce?
Yeah, Carl, I think if my memory's right, now if there's a development in our district and they're filling some wetlands, I think their first requirement is to replace those wetlands in our district. Is that still the case? Or do they have options?
There is no requirement for replacement within your boundaries. If the impact, it has to be first step is within the same service area, which is a much larger area than the watershed district itself. It's, it's broken into 8 service areas that cover the entire state. So I forget the service area. It would be Scott Carver, kind of southwest metro. The mitigation first has to be attempted to be replaced if it goes to banking credits, using credits from that area.
So essentially, credits statewide, I mean, you can only charge or only ask for so much then, probably a
Rate,
going rate.
market rate.
Yeah, market rate,
Yep, which is high in the metro area.
yeah,
Yep.
it is.
I think I had one last slide, certainly other. So I guess what we're looking really forward to tonight is just board acceptance of the report. This was one of the projects that did get extended through, I think, end of March to have completion of the report and submit it to. And then after that, it's really continue the engagement, which Jamie did provide an update, and she has been diligently attempting to reach out to these landowners and have continued discussions either directly or through the contacts with all the 4 primary landowners. You know, assuming that continues to be favorable and the district gets some traction, then I think concurrently or parallel, you'd have discussions with Bowser. If a project really seems to be materializing based on owner acceptance, sure that you have these projects well detailed in your water resource management plan so that they could score higher in terms of pursuing grant funding. So that's the kind of next steps that are listed here.
Thanks. Carl, I had one other question on that first slide. I think it was the first or second slide that you presented saying the low load, you reduced the load potential from this. So if I understand this correctly, I can go grab that, that'd be great. There it was.
Yep.
Down to 237. What was it? So if actually no, it doesn't matter before. So if I understand this, then if the total phosphorus coming through that location, we are looking at this practice for either on the high or one, that's teaching me that capturing 60 pounds of the 237, that's really our effectiveness rate of this practice is only 25%. Is that the best we can do? I know there's cost effectiveness, but is that the best we can do from a capturing?
That is not the best you can do, but that was the best to do within the confines of initial discussions with landowners and in terms of on the landscape that they would be even willing to entertain. So we're staying out of all the production areas, scenarios. They're within the buffer areas. So had there been, yes, you can take this half acre of this production area into the equation, then yeah, cost would go up and so would load reductions as well.
Still, okay, 75% of this is still getting through into the lake. Okay. Anybody else? Bruce?
I guess, I think way back when we were told that the Highland property, we couldn't get any contact with those people. Is that still the case, or do we need to continue to pursue them? I mean, it seems like option, whatever you get, 3 or 2, all of them have less cost and they don't require a pump. Those got to be a recommendation. I mean, that's the best solution for this.
We know that the going back in time, so not this past November, but the November before, Maggie and I met in the field with that landowner, and he was willing to entertain and consider these. Since then, there has not been successful contact with that landowner. I don't think that at that time that the district was really giving any sort of carrots or discussion about carrots for the project. It was more, would you be willing to consider this type of practice for the goodness of the lake, the benefits to the lake? And the answer was yes, but was there any sort of compensation discussion. There was not any sort of compensation discussion. So I wouldn't take anything off the table with any of the landowners, even if the last year has been not successful, without having another run with, you know, a more concrete idea now that you know the cost benefits of what sort of compensation could be towards a landowner.
And can I go ahead, Bruce? You want to do the clarification? I was just going to clarify the compensation is the price that we'd be giving for the perpetual easement. Is that the compensation you're referring to?
Correct, correct.
So I remember when I was the first words I circled were about line 5, right, the flood retention. And before I even got into this and thinking about the whole contacting the owner of the property, made me think of another project that we've talked to a home or a landowner with, and we did flood retention, and it created some images in there that we were looking to flood their property. And so that, along with this project, gets me thinking about the approach that we're making and the language that we're using, because of course flood reduction is simply a benefit from us versus some storage, and talk about it in maybe making sure that we're doing the right approach and being open-minded with the landowners. And that's, I mean, there's a skill set to be able to talk to somebody and use the right words and right communication to keep lines of communication open and find a path that works for both parties, right? So I don't know if this is just more of a seed for you, Joni, to think what is the right approach, but it seems like maybe, well, clearly we've got to be careful language so we don't lose the opportunity to do, we've got these half a dozen potential projects in the upper watershed that have a big impact downstream, figure out the right approach and to get that to happen. And that's probably that's it. That was just the thought. Bruce?
Well, the other thing, looking at the numbers, the cost difference from the Highland property to the Kruger property is significant. I mean, if he's open to an easement and open to us, I mean, you could save a lot, I mean, by you giving him more money.
Yeah.
I hope he's not listening, but if that's the case, it'd be well worth it.
That's what I'm thinking, the open conversation.
Yeah, the
So
open
it's
conversation
whatever
is-
that
What is it that you want,
find path.
you know, so that I mean, there's obviously savings, and $10,000, I assume that's a year for pump maintenance, or is that lifespan?
Here.
A year. I mean, you just look at the numbers, and we need to have conversations with Mr. Highland and make sure he understands that we want to be a partner with him.
Thanks. Anybody else? If not, want to make a motion to accept the feasibility study, appropriate one? Bruce?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Is that what we're asked for? Is a motion to accept the feasibility study? Yeah, I make a motion to approve the feasibility study and then to submit it to the.
Second.
My only thought to take the vote is I didn't say I thought it was a good report. Carl, nicely done. I didn't share that in advance. That's it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Thanks, everybody. All right, the next item on our agenda is our board officer appointments and board officer appointments. Joni, are you going to introduce this for us, or you want me to?
President Meiser, if you need to go ahead with it, that would be just fine.
I think it's going to be fairly simple. We ended up having a conversation on this in the workshop. We currently, for the president, myself, vice president Kurt Hennis, treasurer Bruce Loney, secretary Steve Pond. We're at a point at which actually 3 of our members are currently up for reappointment, and so we have a little uncertainty in that. So the board had some conversation, and we were suggested we would leave this as is at this point, but we need to do this by the rules of for the district on an annual basis in January. So we were. do each one individually. This will cover for the next one too. So that's why we were just going to do this and keep this the same at this juncture, where there's a change, but it just seemed appropriate to just do it at this point. Keep it the same.
Do you want each,
No, I think we can do it en masse.
okay.
All the-
I make a motion
I just
that we continue the same board member officers, President Mike Miser, Vice President Kurt Hennis, Treasurer Bruce Loney, Secretary Steve Pani for 2022.
Second.
We have motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. So we have the same situation on the board liaison appointments. We were looking to keep the juncture, so I would then entertain. Kurt?
I noticed on the meeting of, let's see,
Oh,
what
yeah.
is it?
Proposed action.
Of January 11th, in the very last paragraph, board liaison appointments. A motion must be made to appoint board liaisons for 2021,
Right.
stating what revisions are made from the 20, so it should be 2022 for 2022. The next sentence should be, are made from the 2021 appointments, if any.
So I think I just heard a motion. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
We have motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion. Thanks, Kurt.
Well, I caught it.
Trying to keep us moving. No, and I would take advantage of that. Thank you. All right, we're on to the next item, the resolution 22-353 on the electronic signature policy. Joni.
President Miser and managers. So in state statutes, there is a requirement that governmental entities develop a policy that establishes whether they want to accept or utilize electronic signatures. This has been in statute for quite a while, but really not really been taking action on it. But given the recent increase of use of electronic signatures, I'm recommending that we actually do develop a policy to be in compliance with state statute and provide to staff in terms of the use of electronic signatures. It is my opinion that moving to electronic signatures will increase efficiencies, also increase security for our contracting processes. The resolution basically states that an electronic signature, once again, is something for both accepting from an outside entity and for us to use that electronic signature, both directions, and that an electronic signature needs to include a date, a time, the internet protocol address of the signer, as well as an attribution of the intent of the signer to sign this contract. The resolution, back up and say that using electronic signatures, currently there are programs there, so there would not really be a cost associated with implementing this measure. The resolution then goes on to state what sort of activities we would use electronic signatures for in paragraph 2. So really kind of all of our traditional contracting activities or standard contracts. Also, for construction and for also for grants, we could use it to the extent of doing signing our resolutions and our minutes if we so choose to. It is written so that it gives us the option. It's not mandating, but it's given us the option if we so choose to use it. We could go and use it for these uses. What it does not include is the ability for us to use electronic signatures for anything that needs to be notarized. It also says that it provides a stipulation for when, just a hand signature could be acceptable and set at a limit of $5,000. A contract for $5,000 associated also with the understanding that that payment would only be made after the services are rendered for that contract. It also then does state that things that would not be acceptable as an electronic signature is someone's handwritten signature that it gets then scanned in and then pasted into a document. That would not be a valid electronic signature, as well as like a typed in name as well. So it's defining what is and what is not an electronic signature. So with that, I know that this is the first time that the board is seeing this. So there is a requested action, but I would also be happy if folks would rather just discuss the contents. We wouldn't have to take an action tonight if the board is not comfortable with that. But as submitted in the packet, the request is for board approval of Resolution 22-353, Prior Lake Spring Lake District Electronic Signature Policy.
Thanks, Joni. Joni, I'm going to kick this off. I didn't see any hands go up immediately. On paragraph 3, the no more than 1,000, can you tell us why that number was?
It was per a recommendation of our legal counsel, but we can set it for whatever we feel is an appropriate dollar value.
Did they share why that level?
They felt it was a pretty safe dollar value.
That's what I figured. That's why they were putting a limit on it, to reduce the risk, and that's what I wanted to just sort of confirm. Okay. Can you tell me, are the other WDs, watershed districts, doing this across the state? I understand some of the need for it. I'm just more curious.
Yes, there are at this concurrently that we are working with are also working with other WDs to implement a comparable resolution.
Okay. Anybody else? Bruce?
Just a rough number, Joni, you think how many times you would use this electronic throughout the year?
15 times.
15? Okay. But it saves some back and forth of mailing things and signing things, so.
Right now we're not being very secure, I would say, in our practices.
Yeah, okay. This actually provides more security, what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce?
I make a motion to approve Resolution 22-353, a resolution adopting the Prior Lake Watershed District Electronic Signature Policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 4-0. Thank you. On to item 5.0, our consent agenda. We do have one change. I'll just go ahead and note it. We do have a change in the special meeting minutes from Monday, December 13th. Identifying conversation about our engineering consulting pool. And so that, again, is seeing which item on there. Joni, can you help me?
5.3.
5.3.
5.3. So we're placing 5.3 on there.
You want to amend 5.3 or what?
We're going to swap out. So in our packet, Joni, did you want to say anything more on that? I'm going to let maybe Joni. You had your hand up, sir.
Absolutely, President Meiser. For 5.3, I'm suggesting we amend those minutes. Inadvertently, we did not include in that motion that it also included the recommendation to include all engineering consultants who submitted letters of interest to be in our engineering pool to be allowed in that pool. So that was just clarifying that minutes that had been missed in the first draft of the minutes. I will also say, though, staff recommends that we do also pull consent item 5.5 and possibly 5.8.
Can you possibly 5.8?
I will say 5.8.
5.5 and 5.8 we're going to pull. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else, gents? Anybody up here?
5.5 and 5.8.
5.5 and 5.8 are removed. 5.3 has been replaced with updated meeting minutes dealing with the engineering consulting pool. Do we have a motion then to approve the amended consent agenda?
Yep, I would approve the amended consent agenda as noted.
Second.
We have a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye. That motion carries 4-0 against. Bruce, you're up, sir, with our treasury report.
Okay,
Treasurer.
well,
Or actually, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
We would still like to discuss 5.5 and
Ah.
5.5.
Go for it.
Okay.
Didn't understand that. My apologies.
My apologies as well. So Jeff is going to talk a little bit. So 5.5 is actually for our contract, our cart management services contract with WSB. And he would like to make an amendment to that contract and still hopefully still have managers vote on that item yet this evening.
President Meiser, board managers. Originally, I'd wanted to keep the commercial netting costs or budget separate than the WSB CARP services contract. And I recently discovered that doing would cause a few potential issues. The commercial netters typically don't want to enter into specific contracts with WDs. And in this case, we would have 3 separate contracts with commercial netters. And due to insurance coverages that they lack, we would come into conflict with some of our potential contracts with them. WSB has contracted with the Watershed District over the past years and has included the commercial netters in our contracts. This approach would have WSB subcontracting the commercial netters. This would alleviate the insurance liability issues. I would like to make an amendment to the board of managers to approve the contract with WSB as amended to include the commercial netting budget that was allocated separately for $20,000 into task 2 of the CARP services contract, which would include the commercial netting costs.
So sorry, so can I clarify then, Jeff? Are you saying there's some language change somewhere? Are you recommending some language change outside of just the budget dollars to be included in there?
Not necessarily.
That's not necessary? Okay, that's what I was, and I'm going to confirm that's what we've done in the past. Then in the previous sayings, it's been through WSB, who's actually contracted with the commercial fishermen. Is that correct?
That is correct. With my time at the district, the commercial netting has been included in the WSB contract. In prior past years, you know, there had been alternative contracts, and the Watershed District has had to cover liability costs each contract with the commercial netters.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Bruce?
The 20, okay, I'm a little confused here. The 20,000 is supposed to be a separate item that we would be taking care of in contracting with people that do seines. Is that correct?
Manager Loney, that is correct. That is already within the 611 rough fish management budget, and it had its own
Okay.
separate
So
allocation.
the WB cost not to exceed would be 20,000 plus what they have in here?
That is correct.
74,162.
Oh, jeez.
Anybody else? I'm accepting and supportive of this. It's the way we did it. It sounds like there was just a mistake, or it was not meant to be, so I'm comfortable with this.
Let me ask a question.
Go ahead, Kurt.
So what, it was meant should be 74,000?
Manager Hennis, yes, that's what I am advocating for.
And again, why is it 74 instead of 54?
I had originally wanted to separate the commercial netting costs to provide clarity in our budgeting process and to show you, the managers and the public, that these commercial netting contractors have a different cost than our WSB, just to provide more clarity with the whole process until I, came across information that these separate contracts would have been quite troublesome to complete.
So you intend the 54,000 for WSB and the 20,000 for commercial seniors?
That is correct.
Yet we're putting it under a WSB management services contract?
Like we've done in the past years. Correct. It's how he says it's been done, and it's the best way for us to proceed from a coverage insurance perspective.
Okay. A lot of money, but go ahead.
Bruce?
We do have a signed contract from WSB in here already. And in order to make this, I think, kind of kosher, or to work with everything, normally when you have a signed contract, you're going to have to do some initial, cross out, and both people have to sign. Joni, you know all this. We don't have a legal contract here with this amount. Based on what they've signed. Now we can approve a revised contract, but we have to limit this one. The one that
You are
they signed.
correct, Manager Loney. So we will need to have WSB, we'll have to change the dollar value of that contract and have WSB re-sign it. So really, if the motion is to enter into a contract, total of $74,162,
Yeah.
including the tasks of the existing proposed contract with the addition of adding $1,000 for commercial netters to be subconsultants to WSB.
Yeah, so there have to be some additional language for that provision, correct? You have to add some language, not just a dollar.
I would suggest that we change the language in the contract to make it very clear that that $20,000 is specifically to be used
Right.
and solely used for commercial commercial netters.
So Bruce, I'll clarify, this is not an executed contract. It's a single.
Probably not.
No,
looked like
because we
it was-
haven't approved it, so not.
He had digitally
So
signed
yeah,
it.
that one is an easy one, but this
Right,
language.
they have to revise that.
Yeah, has to
So
get revised.
I'll motion to get this thing underway for further discussion.
Great, thank
I would approve the 2022 WSB Cart Management Service Contract in the amount not to exceed $74,162, and the contract to be revised to include the $20,000 for commercial fishermen service work. That's the right term.
I think that works.
Oh,
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That
Aye.
motion carries 4-0. Thank you. All right, 5.8. You also going to address this one, Joni?
President Meiser and managers, Manager Boyles brought to my attention that potentially two dates on the list of meetings for the Board of Managers for 2022 may come into conflict with the primaries and Election Day. I just learned of this 2 hours ago, so I have not had the ability to confirm whether those dates truly are in conflict or not. I guess the option would be we could adopt these as is, and then if we learn that there is a conflict, we can change that at a later date. Otherwise, we would postpone the adoption of the official calendar till next meeting.
Okay, so Joni, I'm going to do a little clarification first before we dig into that one, because what I heard we removed from the consent agenda is 5.8, the CAC meeting schedule. So the Board of Managers meeting has been approved, and I would concur that now that they approved that, we will just want to modify that, notify the public as you see fit. Does that still hold then for the CAC one that we pulled off?
So I would then recommend that the board just go ahead and approve agenda item 5.8 consent, yeah.
So, okay. Thanks, Joni. Do we have a motion to approve item 5.8 from the consent agenda?
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
We have motion second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. Thank you, everybody. All right, Bruce, now you're on with the treasurer's report, sir.
Okay. If you were to look at, I think it's page 105, the top,
Resolution to sign.
and it says financial report cash basis for the year 2021. And these are preliminary. It does not include year-end payables, adjustments, and allocations. However, you can see with the red, the lines or the item there in red, that for the year, actual results were $750,000 from revenues to expenditures. Everybody see that? I want to make sure you understand that. So essentially, we didn't spend much money in 2021, but we also put quite a bit of money away for alum reserve and upper watershed. So that would be on my next page of the treasury, which now you can see we got some different wording. We got 3 items. Basically, we have cash in, Old National, Sterling, and Northland. Sterling Bank, we have less than $250,000 in there because we don't have any security above $250,000, but we do have security with Old National. We do have pledges from them. So with that, you can see how much cash we have on hand. The restricted permit deposits, restricted PLOC, PLOC O&M funds, our alum reserve funds, and now our upper watershed blueprint are called committed. You can see that we have available cash, and this should really say, I must have missed it again, should really say December of 2021, $1,308,954. So we're starting out the year in pretty good shape. And I think you can see the cash flow from CLA. And I also like to point out this, we get this balance sheet, which is very nice. I like the balance sheet, simple. I think we get that every quarter, talking to Laura. So you can see our cash investments, receivables, our liabilities, and restricted and unassigned. Unassigned is the money that we really have. That and 308,955 is the same as I told you on my treasurer's report. So, any questions? I'd be glad to take them.
Thank you. I do, but it's probably going to end up being for Joni because it was on the budget.
That's good.
Yeah. Joni, there's a couple things that sort of stuck out to me in reviewing this, and if you have answers here this evening, but in under the general fund, I noticed that our fees, the 903 line, budgeted 2,000, and we actually 15,000. Do you know why we were significantly over on fees? Yes, you do. There's a smile, so you do have an answer.
Manager Weiser, I can answer that. That is actually the compensation study for Gallagher.
Oh, yeah.
700. We didn't have a good place to land that one.
Gotcha. Thank you. So then the next one, it's one of the things I've sort of struggled with this report that I know that we've been down a couple of staff for a number of months. So I was looking at this and was sort of expecting that our staff costs, which are a little harder to pull out of some of this, would have been down, but they're not. They're above budget. Do you know, and I think I have that correct, so if, and maybe I'm gonna, because since I see the eyebrows raised, I'm gonna see if I'm looking at this correctly. So under the general, we have administrative salaries and benefits of 90 and change, expenditures of 116, and then the other place we go for our salary benefits is in the program salaries and benefits. And that's where we had budgeted 440 with expenditures of 387. So combined, I'm assuming is accurate, we should have budgeted total of, 530, and we've actually, spent that, which I would have thought these would be below. Thoughts? Am I looking at this correct?
Manager Miser, you are looking at it correct. When I was putting together the budget for 2022, it was my assessment that the budget for 2021 was not calculated correctly.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Let's see, there may be one or two. I know we still don't have those, want to correct it. District monitoring. Now, I know, again, we still may be expecting some expenditures, and I know we didn't do the whiskey yet, but the one that the district monitoring was significantly underspent. By even pulling out the whiskey, it's still under by 50,000. I mean, maybe there's some year-end bills. Is there a reason that's, well, help me understand, please, Joni.
Manager Miser, there probably are still some year-end bills that need to come through, but I would say also that monitoring activity, given the drought this year, there was a lot of monitoring we did not do because we did not, there wasn't any water to monitor in a lot of the streams.
Yeah, stream monitoring was way down.
And so that's telling me that our budgets are
And
into stream monitoring? Is that what I'm understanding?
I would say on top of that, the monitoring budget was pretty generous, and so
Okay,
was probably over budgeted.
okay. I think that was it. That's all I had. Thanks. Anybody else? Anything for Bruce? He's looking for really tough questions. I could see the way he was. I was going to ask any questions.
Actually, I want to make one,
Go ahead, Bruce.
but the number I gave you before is just the implementation fund change in there, and then with the administration fund, we actually ran a deficit, or we went over by 57,000, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, about 700,000 that we did not spend in our budget for 2021. But that isn't finalized, though, so I just want to make that point. There's still bills coming in and other things.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Bruce.
Yep.
Okay, we're on to upcoming meetings and event schedule. Somebody else want to read these for us? Kurt, you want to take this one? Read them for us, please?
My microphone going, there we go. Farmer-led council, the Growing Healthy Soils event. The part one, it's a two-part class, is Thursday, day after tomorrow at 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Ridges of Sand Creek Golf Course in Jordan. That's on County Road 20, or State Highway 20, south towards New Prague. The CAC meeting this month will be, again, the fourth Thursday of the month, January 27th, in the Wagon Bridge Conference Room downstairs from 6:30 until 8 p.m. Board of Managers meeting for February is February 15th, Tuesday, February 15th, again, the second Tuesday of the month, was at 6 p.m. in the Prior Lake City Hall Council Chambers, I assume, preceded by a workshop at 4 p.m. Farmer-led Council. Part 2, soils, is scheduled for March 8th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. again at the Golf Course Ridges of Sand Creek in Jordan.
Joni, you had something too?
Manager Hennis, I just wanted to make sure people understood the next Board of Managers meeting is actually going to be the third Tuesday of the month. The first is actually, you can see it's the 15th. This is the one meeting this year that can be held on the third Tuesday of the month versus the second.
That is the third
So
Tuesday.
it's actually-
That is the third Tuesday.
Yes, so,
Yep.
yes, 15th is the third Tuesday
Third
of the month.
Tuesday. It's not the second, just because of the dates.
Isn't there a conflict with President's Day because the city council has to move the third Tuesday because the third Monday is a holiday?
No,
That meeting, we're at back
Oh, I thought it
in
was the same for
January
February. I
is,
thought it was the same for February because the President's holiday falls the same as the MLK does. No, MLK is January. President's is February. That's what I'm talking.
Bruce said it's the 21st, February 21st. Bruce looked it up.
Okay, all right.
So we're
It's-
good.
It's the week after instead. Thank you.
It's okay. All right, that's it. I would need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
second?
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 4-0. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Night, night.